Man.
By 2021, an estimated 125,000 Roundup cancer-related lawsuits had been filed against the company.
Roundup is the most widely used pesticide in history. Since 1975, Monsanto has sold this herbicide as safe for humans. It was not until 2015 that the World Health Organization publicly declared glyphosate the primary ingredient in Roundup as a probable human carcinogen.
It's purely a scientific evaluation that it can cause cancer, probably carcinogenic in humans.
This morning, fallout from a monumental verdict. A jury in San Francisco found biochemical giant Monsanto liable for former school groundskeeper Dwayne Johnson's cancer, awarding $289 million in damages. For 70-year-old Edwin Hardiman, vindication. A San Francisco jury awarded $80 million to the California man.
By 2021, an estimated 125,000 Roundup cancer-related lawsuits had been filed against the company. But glyphosate also has a negative impact on soil organic matter, according to plant pathologist Dr. Don Huber, who has studied the chemical since the 1970s.
Glyphosate is probably the most chronically toxic chemicals we have ever had in our environment.
Monsanto patented glyphosate as a herbicide in 1974, but the chemical carries two additional patents, both that negatively impact soil health over time. Glyphosate was first patented in 1964 as a chelating agent. A chelator binds to metal ions and breaks them down. Glyphosate was initially used to clear boiler pipes of mineral buildup. The chemical's third patent by Monsanto is as an antibiotic.
In 1995, Monsanto was ready to commercialize the Roundup Ready plants. These were genetically engineered plants. You could spray with Roundup and they would survive and everything else was killed. Simplified weed control dramatically from a farmer standpoint. In the genetically engineered plant, when you apply the glyphosate to it, 80% stays in the plant for as long as the plant's alive. The 20% that moves out of the root system into the soil, it's a very powerful chelator for any positively charged element, nutrient. It's also a very powerful antibiotic.
According to Dr. Huber, after years of applying glyphosate to a field, the chelating effect breaks down important soil mineral nutrients needed to produce a healthy plant. The antibiotic effect depletes soil microbiology, reducing its ability to retain water and sequester carbon. As a result, more than 40 plant diseases thought to have disappeared have re-emerged, such as Goss's wilt, seen here in this Iowa cornfield.
A little dark flecking in the lesion, and that's from your Goss's again also. Glyphosate is a ubiquitous chemical now for us in the environment.
The USDA data suggests that about 270 million pounds of glyphosate are being used in the United States today. 92 or 3% of it is in agriculture, but it's also used by parks districts and homeowners. There are approximately 650 million kilograms of glyphosate used around the world. There's no pesticide in history that has been used remotely closely to that.
U.S. Geological Survey shows it in the air and rainwater and groundwater and the surface waters. Rain brings it down. It also gets into the water from runoff off of fields. Sediment moves, it's going to move chelated glyphosate with it. And as it moves down into the root system, the primary area for detoxification and degradation is in that top 12 to 16 inches. If you have a plant, most of them have a root system that goes below that high microbial area of the soil. Once it moves below that high microbial activity, it's essentially just a matter of time until it reaches the groundwater. Glyphosate is a very difficult chemical to break down. Degradation may be as short as a year and a half in high degradation soils, maybe up to 22 years in a good agricultural soil. Those qualities aren't predictable, and that's why the courts ruled that it was fraud to claim.
Exposure to glyphosate in food is increased when farmers use the product as a desiccant, spraying the crop prior to harvest in hopes of achieving a higher and more uniform yield.
Right now, we use glyphosate as a desiccant. The only place that that chemical can go at that stage in growth is into the seed. That's what we eat. That's where the highest concentration of those very toxic chemicals are. They're not acutely toxic, they're chronically toxic. Glyphosate is probably the most chronically toxic chemical that we've ever released into the environment.
In 2013, independent scientists at MIT, Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff, released a study on glyphosate's long-term antibiotic and chelating effects on the human microbiome. They found that chronic exposure to glyphosate in our food can suppress essential aromatic amino acids and enzymes, creating an imbalance in gut bacteria.
So when the bacteria in the gut start to go bad and your immune system begins to falter, now all of a sudden you begin to respond to this faltering immune system by releasing chemicals that start long-term low-level inflammation. Inflammation is the precursor to all kinds of long-term diseases, atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes.
You look at autism, a Parkinson's disease, an inflammatory bowel, a leaky gut, Crohn's disease, or celiac disease, and again, a number of other diseases that have a direct tie with a proper functioning GI tract.
An imbalance in the human microbiome can also result in the loss of important hormonal functions.
It's sort of like a triangle. The immune system and the endocrine system and the nervous system all are interconnected. There are about at least 60 different molecules that are used as communication between all three of those systems. It was obvious that this neurological endocrine immune connection was being impacted by exposure at very low levels to pesticides and even to nitrate.
Glyphosate is definitely an endocrine disruptor for fetal development for 3 to 6 months. Any concentration of an endocrine hormone disruptor is detrimental to development of fetal tissue.
Endocrine disruptors are basically chemical messages that tell the body your fetus, if you are exposed to a pesticide that might act like an endocrine disruptor or change hormone levels, it's a one-way trip. You cannot come back. The changes in immune system in combination with some of the endocrine hormonal changes can reprogram the biochemistry so that when you're born and when you begin to mature to sexual maturity, all of a sudden, with a normal path of development, now because things have already been changed, the hormones are wrong in terms of their concentration, you may be altered sexually in terms of the way your brain developed and the way your brain is programmed to respond sexually.
Why anyone would even want to consider putting an endocrine hormone disrupting chemical in a food crop defy imagination. A lot of countries, a lot of our export market becoming much, much more sensitive to the side effects of the glyphosate. But there's a lot more concern now from a health standpoint because it's building. The curve is going this way for us, it's doing the same thing for other countries, except they're doing the trials now to say, what happens if I go off of this imported feed and I replace it with non-GMO?
Boy, that is an eye-opening presentation to start us off. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome. This is Pretty Dutty Food. You have to agree, it's a pretty cool name for a conference of this nature. We're discussing some serious issues this morning. My name is Althea McKenzie, and I welcome you to this very important webinar focused on pesticide residue in our food and what it can do to us as human beings. And so this promises to be chock full of information. I don't know what you use to take notes these days, because these days there are so many devices. So whether you're a traditional note taker or you're using your iPad, you're using your pen and paper. I don't know what you're using, but believe you me, you have to be prepared to take notes. Before we jump into all of the activities that we have planned for you and the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, can we please pause for the playing of the national anthem of Jamaica? Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Population Division estimates that by the year 2030, there will be 9.7 billion people on Earth, around 30% more people than in 2017. Nearly all of this population growth will occur in developing countries, countries like ours, countries like those in the Caribbean region. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, estimates that in developing countries, 80% of the increase in food production needed to keep pace with the population growth is projected to come from either increases in yields and or the number of times each year that crops can be grown on the same land. What they're saying is that we need to be growing more food, or we're going to have to be producing more food in order to feed the burgeoning population. Now, only 20% of extra food production is expected to result from an expansion of farming land. Pesticides can prevent large crop losses and will therefore continue to play a role in agriculture. However, the effects of exposure to pesticides on humans and the environment are a continuing concern. And that is why we have to meet in a forum like this to discuss ways of ensuring that we are calling a halt in some cases, and of course, providing solutions to people on how it is that they can move forward. And so the use of pesticides to produce food, both to feed local populations and for export, needs to comply with good agricultural practices. We're going to be discussing some of those practices here today. But mine is not the task to provide the formal welcome. That is the job of Janice Dehaney. She is board chair. She started her professional career in the allied healthcare field, donning a lab coat, sitting behind a microscope and interacting with body fluids. But not wanting to be confined and limited, she segued into pharmaceutical sales in 1986, where she moved up the ranks to sales manager for the Caribbean with Janssen Sealab. In 2005, she took a pause, let's call it retirement now, where her interest in organic agriculture developed and peaked. She started Jandu Farm in 2006, cultivating on a small section of a 95-acre property of agricultural lands in Trelawney owned by her dad, and applying organic principles. Always ready for a challenge and wanting to get a good grasp of the requirements for organic production, she participated and was successful in the iFoam Inspectors course in 2007. She has been a member of JOAM since that time, and she's also the current president of the St. James Horticultural Society. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a woman who is leading from the front. Put your hands together, wherever it is that you are. You may put them together on the screen or just do it. I can't see you. but we know that you're cheering her on as she comes to provide the official welcome and introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Janice Dehaney.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Althea, for that warm introduction. And it is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of you on board. I acknowledge our moderator, Althea, the team from Carrefour, and also the panelists that have consented to be a part of this exciting Pretty Dutty Food webinar. So JOAM is the host in collaboration with Genesis, which is a soil regeneration project which we're undertaking now in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining. And JOAM as an advocacy group always is concerned with regards to all things organic in Jamaica. And clean food is one of the things that we are really very mindful of. And we've always been concerned about the quality of the food that we're consuming and the levels of pesticides, as well as whether or not it's nutritionally dense. And so we thought it very, very opportune to dovetail on all the work that we've been doing. We're in phase 2 of the Genesis project. And we thought it was just the right time to highlight the importance of clean food and the impact that pesticides have been having on our food production and consumption in Jamaica. Our vision at JOAM, which is the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement, is brand organic Jamaica, utilizing regenerative agricultural practices towards sustaining healthy families, communities. And so it's right or mandate as part of what it is that we're doing. JOAM started 3 years ago, interesting conference called Farming as a Business. And so this year, we thought we could make connections from farm to fork. And we are using this opportunity, bringing in some persons who are very involved with food consumption and food preparation, like the likes of Chef Brian Lumley, Liz Soames, Christopher Binns, to kind of stimulate the interest. I acknowledge also our main presenter who will have the data and all that we need to know, especially about our local setting, Dr. Dwight Robinson, who is the head of the Pesticide Control Authority in Jamaica. And so we acknowledge Dr. Dwight Robinson as well as the rest of the panelists. So we want you to be involved, stay tuned, participate as best as you can, because this Pretty Dutty Food pesticide residue in our food is going to be an eye-opening presentation, and it's going to be triggering and stimulating a lot of discussion with regards to what we are doing and how we move it forward. So at this time, I'd like to invite project lead, Mrs. Nicola Shirley Phillips, I'll hand over to her and she'll continue with regards to the Genesis project. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janice. I really appreciate the introduction, and just saying welcome to everyone that has decided to join us today. I'm so excited to see so many people that have registered. I think we have over 300 people, probably up to 400 people that should be on this call. This subject matter is so important. I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about the Genesis project, but also talk about why we came up with Pretty Dutty Food. So the Genesis project, as Janice mentioned, we're going around the island. We're partnering with the Ministry of Agriculture to go and look at soil health and give strategies that will be able to help our farmers to reduce and also, even not use some of the fertilizers and chemicals that they've been using, because we actually in the organic movement have the strategies and very old practices that have worked and actually work across the world in terms of compost and biochar and effective microorganisms. We have 11 different strategies that we brought to the ministry and said, if we do this, we can reduce the use of these pesticides and these fungicides and these herbicides and all the fertilizers that we're using. Because what's been happening over the years, we've been really damaging our soils. And part of it is because of the culture that we've kind of grew up in, right? We grew up in a very extraction farming methodology from slavery days when we don't really care. We're just kind of growing things to export, not thinking about the soils that we're using and are we regenerating those soils. And we've come to a point where we are today when our soils are really damaged, right? And so how do we go now to restore those soils? Because we live on this island and we want to be able to, give something to our next generation. And also the soils are becoming so toxic that they're actually really impacting all the water and our lives as well. And we see that. And I think if we, with the number of people that are on this call, if you could probably, if there was a way to put your hand up, how many people do you know that is suffering from some kind of cancer? They're probably, almost everybody in the room would probably have their hand up. I've been seeing recent people that are exiting, transitioning, dying because of something in their system is off, right? And so as we go around the island, what was happening, we would look for demonstration sites in different parishes. And I have to tell you that being out there in the field, meeting different farmers, I got pretty depressed, because what I saw was a lot of chemical farming, and our farmers really don't know anything about compost, and just the not just the use, but the overuse of it. Because most of the people that get some of these chemicals, we know in Jamaica we don't measure, right? We don't have no measuring cup, no measuring spoon come with this thing. So if we're going to use some, we're going to use a little extra, right, to just make it even better. And then sometimes we're even using things like tick wash and those things on plants because we want to see no bug bites, right? And we feel that shows that the food is, we don't have any crop loss or anything like that. So we're using very, very heavy usage or the incorrect things on some of the plants that we're using, that we're growing. And so that has a long-term effect on not just the fact that the person who's a spray person, but also the people who are going to be consuming it. So Pretty Dutty Food kind of came about with a conversation with Chef Lumsey and myself at the Organic Farmers Market at Ujima, which happens every Saturday at Hope Gardens. And he was purchasing some products, and we started to have a conversation about what I was seeing as I was driving around the island and explaining, like, Chef, you're getting food from different places. We're very grateful that you get some organic food from us. But a lot of chefs across the island and cook shops, everybody, they're using cabbage, they're using different vegetables, they're using tomatoes, they're using onions, using all this stuff. Do you understand what it means to spray a lot of these chemicals? And then you're now making the food, but it looks pretty, but it's really a toxic mess. And so really going through that conversation about how food grows and what it means when we consume it and how our bodies are reacting. And so there's a responsibility and a partnership with the farmer and the chef, right? And the more that our farmers understand and the more of our consumers and chefs understand, it's a better way for us to be able to bridge that gap, to understand that farmers are, for us, if food is your medicine, the farmer is a doctor. And the chef, you're the pharmacist, because you're putting these ingredients together, because every plant is almost plant medicine. So if you put these combinations together, they may look pretty on the plate, but are you actually harming your very customers that you're supposed to be serving? So that's how Pretty Dutty Food came about. And I just wanted people to kind of understand where we're going with this and understand the responsibility of, we're not going to do a blame game because we all got kind of bamboozled into this, but we all individually have a responsibility for ourselves and our family. Each day, what are we consuming? And asking that question from the supermarkets or the grocer or your farmer, how are you growing this crop? What are you using? And for us who are in the industry to start to offer other alternatives, because whatever you're finding in a synthetic way there's also organic solutions. So we're here to share that with you and to look at it. So let's have a conversation about what's actually happening in our own backyard. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that this will be an enlightening and eye-opening discussion. And just remember that JOAM is here. We are doing this work across the island. We have about 2 more years of doing this training. If you have any interest, do contact us.
Big thank you to Nicola Shirley Phillips. And let me tell you something, Nicola, there was so much excitement in terms of this conference. I got so many calls. Clearly, you're all out in the field doing a significant amount of work, helping people to understand that you are going to be on with this today. And of course, just preparing yourselves to share the information. But it is very important work that JOAM is doing. And significantly, the JOAM-JENESYS project is focused not just on those farmers who are already growing organically, but it really is a project that is designed for all farmers, whether they're conventional or organic. And I think it is making a world of difference. And ladies and gentlemen, just a little bit about Nicola. She is described as an ambassador for the natural world. She's into permaculture, regenerative organic farming. She's a consultant of that. She is into community and economic development. And her work, she says, is really designed to reconnect us to what ultimately surrounds us, the earth beneath our feet. And so when you hear about the work being done in the organic community, invariably her name is going to come up. Thank you so very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving along because we want to ensure that we get to the meat of the matter and that we're able to have robust conversation with each other between now and when we end at midday. If you're just joining us, if you're just coming onto the platform, we welcome you to Pretty Dutty Food. We're going to have some serious conversation. We're talking about pesticides and how it is that it impacts our food and what, if anything, we can do about it. We're moving now to Liz Soames for comment. Liz Soames has lived and worked in Jamaica for 20 years. As a farmer, she cultivates specialty organic produce in the breadbasket parish of St. Elizabeth. As a sustainable agricultural and culinary consultant, she has completed successful projects at private coastal villas, hotels, and small farms. Liz has also worked for NGOs that focus on sustainable agriculture, establishing one of the first organic farming cooperatives in the Caribbean, in addition to starting the region's first farm-to-table dinner series. Currently, she's working on a groundbreaking pesticide residue project as part of a partnership with both private, public, and academic entities in Jamaica. As of 2022, she has been splitting her time between Jamaica and New Orleans in the USA, where she lives with her husband and daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Liz Soames.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know we all live really busy lives, and so I just feel very honored that all of the, few hundred folks have decided to tune in and to listen to these issues that are so dear to all of these speakers' hearts. I also feel so honored to have been asked to speak, and I'm in really great company here with all of these other really intelligent and dedicated other panelists in their various fields. I actually wanted to take my time that's been allotted to me to kind of talk about my journey in this field and how it kind of reflects a little bit of the journey of agriculture itself in Jamaica and worldwide, because I do believe like the personal is also the political, the personal is also the global. So just gonna kind of take my time here to speak about my personal journey in this realm. So I was a very idealistic person in my early 20s when I first moved to Jamaica from the US. I was awarded a grant that sent me to the island to establish one of the first or the first organic farmers cooperatives in Jamaica. And the grant funded me to do this work for 2 years. And I focused on St. Elizabeth, primarily because St. Elizabeth, as many of you know, produces about 80% of the island's domestic vegetable production. And as such, it's kind of not only just the breadbasket of Jamaica, but it's a bit of a hotbed for pesticide use, heavy pesticide use. And the project, starting an organic agriculture project in that area, would be similar to trying to do something like that in the Iowa of the United States. Meaning that in a place like Iowa here in the US, it's a very heavily agriculturally produced area with a lot of chemical inputs. And so I kind of just jumped right into the fire. And one of the methodologies that I used was to kind of go for low-hanging fruit. We have a large Seventh-day Adventist population, Rastafarian population. These are folks who already were feeling very strongly about growing things naturally, about using older methods of organic agriculture that perhaps their grandparents and parents had been using. So my training focused on folks who were already converted, so to speak, and going out into the field and doing trainings with small farmers that were not necessarily inclined in that way was more difficult, but with a lot of time and patience. At one point, I was able to organize, I think it was about 5 farms. One of those farms was actually the site for what Althea had mentioned, which was the first farm to table experience in Jamaica and in the Caribbean, actually. The farm was the site of one of my trainings. It had switched over to organic agriculture, and then was an incredible experience for tourists and locals alike to come to and sit in the field and dine and hear about this farmer's particular journey, switching over to organic. And that was really put into full motion by our partnership with Jake's Hotel in St. Elizabeth, who I really credit for being, one of the most incredible advocates of my work and the work of sustainability and organic in agriculture in Jamaica. One of the biggest successes from setting up this farmers cooperative was actually Jake's willingness to sign something that we called a farmer to kitchen agreement, which I still very much promote with different projects I work on, which is when you get either a hotel or a business entity to agree above all else to purchase their items from places that are both local but also growing in the sustainable ways that you support and that your customers support. So Jake's was completely instrumental in that. However, going back to this sort of journey portion, that was in many ways a very small effort that I was able to make because it was really just me, and I was funded by one foundation, and I was able to help convert and transition folks over to 100% organic on a small scale. And I guess we can all relate to the fact that as we get older, we become perhaps a little less idealistic and a little bit more realistic. And one of the revelations and conclusions that I came to as I continued to live and farm on my own in Jamaica is that there needs to be some balance. Folks are underserved, particularly small farmers, and particularly in St. Elizabeth. The need for a high yield and to make money to support your family trumps all else. And so, my mind really went to how do we balance between being 100% organic, fully idealistic, to maybe a way that is more integrated, that can really work with the way that people need to make money and work with the way that people need to live, and also literacy levels, all of these different complex factors that play into how one farms in order to make a living and to put food on the table of your family. So along that journey, I was always in partnership and felt very supported by Minister Tufton, who at the time when I moved to Jamaica was Minister of Agriculture, and then, as we know, has become Minister of Health. We had a really kind of poignant meeting right before the pandemic where basically he said to me, we just need the data. We need a great white paper that essentially says what is going on with pesticide and pesticide residue in this country, and how can we get that data, very expertly pulled together so that we can affect change on the legislative level. So that's a 20-year journey, right? Going from kind of piece by piece, one-on-one training, very idealistic, to now here in my mid-40s, putting together a coalition, which we called the Coalition of Concerned Citizens, working with private entities such as Wincinco, Sandals Foundation. Here's where I'm going to start messing up and forgetting my sponsors, but also public, the government of Jamaica, to work together to come up with a partnership that would fund this groundbreaking study, which Althea spoke about in my bio. And the American, the AFJ, also giant sponsors. Thank you to Wendy Hart. So basically, we were funded for 2 years. The study is going to be wrapping up fairly shortly, to really go out in the field, much like Nicola has done, and to do pesticide residue testing with very specific tests, and to take samples from different parishes and different regions and different farmers to really get the hard data. When the study is finished, we will have what I said before, like a white paper to present that these are the actual facts. And then with those facts, we'll be able hopefully to make a legislative change, which would either prevent certain chemicals from being even let into the island as an extreme, and then a little bit more of a balanced and enforceable means for farmers and the folks that sell these chemicals to do it in the right way, in the prescribed way. Because as Nicola said, we don't measure in Jamaica, we just kind of put a cocktail together of something that might be highly toxic. So it's not necessarily about disuse, it's about misuse oftentimes. And so that's really been, I feel like, the culmination of my career in Jamaica. It's taken me from a young idealistic person training farmers in organic, my husband and I having our own organic farm, and then moving into, as Althea said, consulting with hotels for really my job, villas, small farms in transitioning to organic, as well as developing really interesting food and beverage programs around organic, for example, the farm to table experience at Jake's, to then really being on the policy side of things, as I am right now. So I hope that that is an inspiration for folks. Really, it's about persistence and patience. I think that's one of the things that living in Jamaica has taught me the most, is that if you buck up against a wall, you figure out how to get over that wall and keep going. And so I share that as probably the cornerstone of my journey in Jamaica. And that's really where I am now with this project. And I do believe the next speaker is Dr. Robinson, who has been my rock and really very much my co-lead and just a tremendous colleague on this pesticide residue project. We were recently, a few weeks ago, or was it a few months ago, in the field together in St. Elizabeth, and it's a pleasure to work with him and the rest of the folks on our steering committee. And if anybody has any questions or wants to participate or even donate to some of the final costs of this project, I am all ears. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you so very much, Liz. I had conversation with a farmer from St. Elizabeth this morning, and he was talking about the challenges that the farmers in the parish, they would have faced in 2024. But what is amazing is that he, like other farmers, they're a very resilient bunch. They're like the phoenix rising from the ashes. And clearly a project like yours is designed to help to assist farmers to have the best possible outcome. And of course, you along the way, you're teaching them these new techniques that many of them will be using as they head into the future. Thank you so very much once again. And you're perfectly correct. Our next speaker is Dr. Dwight Robinson. He's a senior lecturer and former head of the Department of Life Sciences, the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. He holds a BSc in chemistry and a PhD in entomology. So he understands a thing or two about insects. He specializes in the ecology and management of arthropod pests and the fate and management of pesticides in tropical island ecosystems. Over the last 34 years, he has been involved in research related to the monitoring and fate of pesticides in the Jamaican environment. Dr. Robinson is a member of the board of directors of the Caribbean Academy of Science, Jamaica chapter, and chairman of the Pesticides Control Authority's Pesticides Review Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Dwight Robinson.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the invitation to be a part of this very important webinar. I just want to quickly give an overview of what we have been doing and the team that's working together to monitor pesticide residues that may be in our food chain. So some background information. Jamaica imports, when you look at the import data, anywhere between 2.5 to 3.2 million kilograms of pesticides annually. And the majority of that pesticide is actually used in the agricultural sector. It's estimated that globally, about 60% of pesticides actually are used in the agricultural sector. Now, if you take a look at the amount of pesticides used per capita globally, is 0.07 kilograms per capita. However, the data in Jamaica suggests that our per capita use is 0.6 kilograms. Now that's almost 10 times the global load. So you can see, or you may conclude from this, that Jamaica has too healthy an appetite for pesticides. Now, the big problem with that is that a lot of these pesticides are what we refer to as highly hazardous pesticides. In short, we call them HHPs. And while there has been a good move for many years to move us away from highly hazardous pesticides, the move has been a little bit too slow. Now, when we talk about HHPs, we're talking about those pesticides that are highly hazardous. They persist in the environment for a long time, and they usually cause serious environmental and health concerns for the population. And you can see the list of highly hazardous pesticides by going to Pan International and taking a look at it. There's no secret there as to what they are. So with that kind of concern about the amount of pesticides that come into Jamaica, this study was developed to assess the pattern and use of agricultural pesticides and their residues in the Jamaican environment. And just to show you, there are a whole lot of persons collaborating on it. I won't call them out individually, but you can see this there, because there's this general concern that pesticides are not being used in a way that protects the health of the population and the environment. Now, this project was to determine the pattern and level of use of the residues of agricultural pesticides that were imported in Jamaica. And I just want to quickly give you a little snapshot of some of the things that we learned, minus some of the details, as it's not for me to release the full details. So pesticide formulations, we looked at the importation of pesticides up to 2021. That's the data that was available. And you can see Jamaica is importing over 600 formulations of pesticides each year. That's a whole lot of pesticides. And when you look at it, over 40% of those that were imported were listed for use in the agricultural sector. So as you can see, the agricultural sector is utilizing the lion's share of the pesticide that's imported. Now, the concern we had there was that of the active ingredients that were looked at, 40 of them were classified as highly hazardous pesticides. And that's the group of pesticides that cause a lot of concern and the type we would rather not see being used in Jamaica. And all of these were brought in for use in the agricultural sector. Now, the question is asked, are they entering the food chain? That's one of the things we're here to discuss today. So we had a previous study done. The PCA had done studies between 2009 and 2014. And in those studies, it was reported that 11% of the samples, the fresh vegetable samples taken, pesticide residues were detected on them. Our study that ran from 2022-23 and continuing into 24-25, 26% of the samples had detectable levels of pesticide residues on them. So you can say we're not improving. That's over 10 years, and instead of having less residues detected, we ended up with more residues detected. And when you look back at this study that was done in 2009-2014, you will see the crops that had the highest level of detection, not the highest concentration, but most frequently the residues detected on these. So callaloo, thyme, pak choy, cabbage, tomato rounded up the top 5. Hot pepper came in sometime. So you want to look to see what is happening in terms of now. What are the changes? So looking at it there, you will see a situation where you're seeing this. It means that those are the crops on which we detected pesticide residues. So put the colors, the ones that are listed in red. What you realize is that the same crops that 10 years ago were coming up with frequent pesticide residue detections, cabbage, callaloo, pak choy, thyme, tomato, are the same ones that we are finding having pesticides more frequently 10 years later, which means that we are not learning the lesson and we're not changing our practices in the way we actually should. So remembering this graph, there seems to be no difference. It's almost as if we could just change a year and the graph would be appropriate. Now, people may always want to find what pesticides are entering. Are the highly hazardous pesticides the ones that are entering the food chain, that are creating potential problems? And so this is a quick list of some of the things that have been found in both years. And again, if you look at it, the ones that have been lightened there are a whole list that it looks too similar to what we were seeing 10 years ago. And it suggests that we are not changing the practice. And these that are highlighted here are highly hazardous pesticides. Now, what we do, how we deal with it, that's for discussions and for us to move forward. So having shared this information, again, I ask the question, are HHPs impacting our food chain? And I think that is what we will be discussing as we go forward for today and hopefully in the future as we work towards a solution for what this problem that we may be having. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Robinson. That is a lot of very frightening information you have shared there. When we think about the amount of pesticides that we are importing into the country each year. But of course, the role of the Pesticides Control Authority is to provide the information so that people can understand what is going on and how it is that they can use pesticides safely, if at all. I do notice, was it Nicola who mentioned the measurement? I know someone mentioned measurements a little bit earlier on. Jamaican farmers tend to use the cap instead of the standard measurements. So perhaps that is something that we're going to have to take and look at as well. How it is that we advise them, whether they're using products that are organic or not, we certainly have to provide the information to them. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of individuals who have dedicated their time, their talent to working in the organic sector. And it is not by chance, it is certainly by choice. They want to ensure that people have the knowledge, the know-how to grow their businesses and to provide food that is good, wholesome, and nutritious. Our next presenter is one of these people. Christopher Binns is a son of the soil of St. Anne, the Garden Parish. He emigrated to Canada as a child. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Toronto and worked for a number of years in both the restaurant and health services industry, where he became even more aware of the vital connection between food and health. On his return to Jamaica in 1996, Christopher concentrated his energies on building the community where he was born and used his family land as the main vehicle for giving back. Many of the young people in the community helped him to establish the farm. They in turn benefited from learning firsthand about sustainable agriculture and community development. In the early days of developing Zionite's farm, Christopher was encouraged by a couple of his mentors to join the Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement, JOAM, to enhance his knowledge of organic farming practices. And he eventually became the chair of JOAM's Northeast region and initiated a program of site visits to small farms from St. Anne to Portland in order to introduce farmers to organic principles and assist them in setting up their farms accordingly. 2009 was the year that Christopher and his wife, Lisa, co-created Stush in the Bush, one of Jamaica's first vegetarian farm-to-table fine dining experiences. Stush in the Bush has grown from strength to strength, building on the same principles on which it was founded. Love for the earth and all she provides. Love for the plant and animal life, and love for each other. Award-winning Stush in the Bush caters to a discerning local and international clientele. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Binns.
Greetings and salutations to everyone. It is a pleasure to be online with the concerned community about, what's happening with our food. Respects to JOAM for always being the flag bearer for organic in Jamaica, and all of the individuals that come together to really make it happen. JOAM is a volunteer organization, which really speaks to people that have integrity about what's going on with our food. So I'm here primarily to present a food perspective, because that's what we're all into. We're into this food thing. And as I listen to Liz, Dr. Robinson, Nicola, and all the people that have spoke so far, one of the things that keeps resonating in my mind is that as individuals, we can only do so much. We can do a lot. There's this quote by Margaret Mead about, it takes individuals to really move the dial. And it's always a small group of committed individuals that have made some of the greatest changes in the world. So that's what we're attempting to do with JOAM and Project Genesis especially. Genesis, the name came up when we were discussing this project that I've been in love with from day one, because it's connected to a lot of the things that I hold dear. And it stands for the Jamaica Environmental Regenerative System. And the reason why I chose system on the end is because as we're going forward with trying to clean up the dirty food, one of the main things that we have to look at is that it's a systematic approach. And this system begins by looking at, why do we have this abundance of all of these chemicals in our food system in the first place? So whenever I hear the word side, whether it be pesticides, herbicides, because we're really talking about pesticides. I hear that word thrown around a lot since we're talking, but there's a lot more than just the pesticides. You have herbicide, you have fungicide, you have insecticide, you have silicide, you have selective herbicides. But anytime I hear the suffix side, it brings me back to the main issue that I have with the current system that we have is that side, if you take it a little further, you're going to talk about genocide, homicide, infanticide. It always refers to death. And the idea that our food system, which is supposed to provide us with life, has been overtaken by chemicals that are made to kill is alarming and also very much something that boggles the mind. But it brings us to what the main issue with this thing is, that as we try to approach, changing the way that we look at our food system, changing the model, changing the paradigm, we have to look first at policy. The policies that we have in this country that allow these chemicals to come in, that actually encourage these chemicals to come in. So if I'm buying a seed, for instance, and let's start with the seed, one of the main issues that we have with going organic in Jamaica is that you cannot buy organic seeds nowhere on the island of Jamaica. And the policy that's set up is actually set up to be prohibitive to bringing in organic seeds. So if I want to bring in an organic seed, I have to get a phytosanitary certificate. And what's happening at plant quarantine is that whatever policy that they have, wherever it came from, means that it's easier to bring in seeds that have been inoculated with with all these different things like pesticides, like things that they spray on the seed to prevent insecticides. You ever get a carrot seed that's supposed to be kind of a gray color, and all of a sudden it's bright orange? It's because it's been covered in an insecticide. So if I try to bring in an organic seed, they end up being held at plant quarantine because they're not covered in this pesticide. So I'm thinking, okay, one, there's a need to prevent the introduction of seed-based pathogens into our agricultural system. True. So we have to prevent that. We also prevent seeds might also bring insect seeds, like you bring in a certain type of seed, and on that seed is some sort of pathogen that's now going to destroy our food environment. So yes, we have to protect our food environment. But how does making it easier to bring in a poison seed versus to bring in a non-poisonous seed become something that enables our organic farmers? There's no availability of organic fertilizers on the island as well. So if you're going to be getting organic inputs to boost your soil fertility, you're really left hands up. You don't have it. It's not there. So you don't have organic seeds. You don't have organic soil enhancers. You don't have organic anything. We don't have an organic sector that is codified into our policies so that farmers that claim to be organic or growing organic have a set of guidelines that guide them to getting to becoming organic. And even the very word organic, we have a lot of difficulty with that over the years, because when I first started to farming, a lot of the farmers that I talked to, number one, they told me flat out, you can't grow food without pesticides. You can't grow food without synthetic fertilizer. You just not go get nothing out of your crop. You can grow a little bit for yourself, but to take it to a commercial way, it was like they thought I was mad. I was crazy. There was nothing going to come out of what I was doing. Give thanks, over 27 years later, we have totally shown people that, yes, you can grow food organic, and you can also grow it in such a way that you're economically viable, because that is the key for anything that we're doing with agriculture. And I heard it mentioned earlier in that if you're telling people, okay, phase out the pesticides, fungicides, the herbicides, the insecticides, the pesticides, all of the death, take them out of our food system. What happens now if I'm farming and I have an infestation of caterpillars, moths, stink bug, whatever, a virus, anything that's going to happen? How do we now treat those things so that I don't lose my crop? So it reminds me of a time early out when we were growing up here, I was one of those almost organic people. So we didn't use the fertilizers, we didn't use the pesticides. We were still buying local seeds, and we did a crop of broccoli. And beautiful, this broccoli came up. We had about an acre spread out all over the farm, and they were doing wonderful, green and pretty. We weren't adding any fertilizers. We were using natural ways of trying to improve our soil fertility. And about 3/4 to the crop, when the broccoli just started to flower, the broccoli started to turn black from the inside. And we panicked. We were like, oh, this is bad. What are we going to do about this? And somebody suggested that we use a pesticide, or I think it was something to do with the fungus. It was a fungicide. So I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And then at the same time, I don't want to lose this crop of broccoli because we've put so much effort into it. It looks so good, and we're right at the harvest. And I broke down. I went out, somebody recommended something, put it in the knapsack sprayer, mixed it according to the regulations on the thing. And as soon as I started to spray the stuff, I felt a tingling in the back of my neck. And I was like, nah, that's enough. That's all I need to know, that this thing is immediately affecting my health. Maybe it was in my mind, maybe it was in my head. I don't care. I threw down the knapsack, and we basically lost about 50% of that crop. But it was a lesson that if I'm going to be telling, especially our St. Elizabeth farmers, that, hey, the pesticides is not the way to go, what type of viable alternative am I going to be providing for them? I want to plant this broccoli. Where can I get organic broccoli seeds, right? My broccoli is doing great. What type of organic inputs are available so that I can maintain my soil fertility? What about the pests that I might be having? How can I integrate beneficial insects? How can I integrate crop sharing crops so that I am intercropping crops in my broccoli that will help to prevent the insects? How can I select the right area so that I'm not encouraging fungus? And all of these things are what Project Genesis is enabling our farmers to do. Island-wide, we're going from space to space, giving farmers the know-how, the skill, the information, the support, all of these things so that they have an option, a viable option. But at the same time, if we're now trying to bring in seeds to facilitate this process, and our seeds are now being held at planned quarantine, potentially indefinitely until they spoil, and $3,000 worth of seeds that were going to be able to support our farmers are now all of a sudden can't get to the farmers because of the policies that are at planned quarantine, then how am I going to really convince farmers that this is in any way viable? It makes it very difficult. And coming from our perspective at Stush in the Bush, yes, we grow a lot of the produce that goes into our dining experience, but there's times when onions, for instance, onions hate me. They won't grow well up here. So I have to find somebody that has brought in organic onion seeds, has grown them in an organic way, and chances are that supply is limited. And when we're thinking about providing a whole agricultural sector with the tools to enable them to do this, we also have to think about scale, right? So you have our biggest industry in Jamaica is tourism. So you have a lot of these tourism interests, the hotels, the villas, the restaurants, the small producers, the agro producers, people that are making product from their produce that would love to get organic produce. But where are they going to get it from? Ujima, kudos to Nicola and the Ujima team, Source Farm Foundation, for creating this oasis of clean food. But if I came to you as the Rio or the Jamaica Grant or Bahia Principal, and I'm saying, okay, I need to stock my pantry with organic produce for the year, is that even possible? Can we provide 2 tons of organic carrots? Can we provide 2 tons of, because it's a matter of scale. So how do we get to the point where, sure, we're saying the right things, sure, we want to clean up our food system, but how then can we enable the farmers to create the supply, to get the organic seeds? It has to start with policy. And what I'm hoping will happen out of this conference that we're having now is that after we're finished here, we can now, along with the research that Liz and Dr. Robinson are doing, go back to the government and tell them that, hey, here's the problem. You know the problem. And I'm going to add another layer to this thing that's happening with America and America First and Make America Great Again, is that a lot of these things that we're depending on could at any point become so prohibitive that we can't even afford to buy all these chemicals, fertilizers, and stuff. So we have to get to a point where we're saying, yeah, Jamaica first. Let's look at how we can sustainably create an industry, an organic industry that's producing its own seeds. We can enable farmers to increase their soil fertility. We can give them the tools that they need to help phase out these chemicals that were left over from World War I, World War II. Let's remember that. Things like Agent Orange was heavily glyphosate based. That's where it's coming from. When they tried to cut back on the ganja industry and they were spraying paraquat from the air, paraquat was used for military application. Dow was a producer of these chemicals for military purposes. And when the wars ended, they had to figure out how they could offload these chemicals. And they changed them up a little bit, made them usable for agricultural practices, and then invaded our food system with the so-called Green Revolution. The last thing I want to say is that as we go forward with what we're doing here, we need to come to some understanding that it's a two-way street. If we expect our farmers to adopt cleaner practices, then we have to have the resources for them to do that sustainably. It can't be a matter of, yes, we're growing organic, but we can't feed ourselves. It's not viable. We can't get seeds. We can't get fertilizers. All of these things that we need to really enable our food system. So it's a pleasure to be on here and look forward to, taking this thing to the next level.
Thank you so very much, Chris. And boy, you have raised a number of very interesting points. I know that we're chomping at the bits to get to the question and answer section, and that will come. But in the meantime, we have one final presentation, and this one comes from Brian Lumley. An award-winning executive chef who has etched his name among Jamaica's finest culinarians. Distinguished by his trademark white jacket and black-rimmed glasses, Chef Lumley's culinary prowess goes far beyond appearances, with a rich reserve of dedication and creativity fueling his success. Renowned for his humility, warmth, and impeccable work ethic, both inside and outside the kitchen, he stands out as a respected figure in the culinary industry. From an early age, Chef Lumley displayed a creative vision and ambition to open his own restaurant, and he did. That first restaurant that he opened at just 26, 689 by Brian Lumley, did exceptionally well, but he wanted to expand his culinary horizons, and so he journeyed to far-off lands, stints in Doha, Qatar, and St. George's, Grenada, before eventually returning to his roots in Kingston, Jamaica. Ever the trailblazer, Chef Lumley collaborates with beloved brands like Maggie Jamaica, elevating their culinary profile and delighting generations of consumers with a blend of innovation and taste. There is far more to him, Chef of the Year, and all sorts of other fantastic accolades, but time doesn't allow us to go through it all. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Chef Brian Lumley.
Thank you, Althea. What an introduction. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here amongst this panel of esteemed presenters. I'm looking forward to learning a lot. I always look forward to our conversations with Nicole at Ujima Farmers Market on the weekend. when I get the time to go up there. I mean, anytime I'm free, I go up there. If I'm missing, he knows that it's work that's keeping me away. Chris, it's good to see you. Big fans of the folks there, Sushi and Bush, and what they're doing. I'm very excited every time I see, any highlights of their coming up. I'm pretty embarrassed to say I have not been up there yet, but I always promise that that's going to change very, very soon. But I'm still a fan from afar. Anybody that has known me, I've been in the culinary industry for 20 years. And when I opened my restaurant about 12 years ago, I wanted to do something that celebrated Jamaican cuisine. I wanted to do something that had, a gourmet touch. And gourmet for me is not just about pretty plates, but it's about the source of the food and the nourishment the food provides and the way in which it's prepared. There's something when I travel and there's a craving that I develop for Jamaican food. At any point in time when I'm away for too long, as I come back to Jamaica, there's a warm aroma of rice and peas that I'm craving, or a refreshing coconut water, or I don't know, it's the oxtail, the curd goat, the salad, the vegetables, the fruit. I mean, the sweetness is just different, and I crave Jamaican products, in a way that it's just hard to describe. When I closed the restaurant 689 and went to Qatar, so before I used to suffer from sinusitis. Right, and my mom has it, my sister has it, my brother has it, and when I was going to Qatar, it was daunting on my mind because it's a desert. So I'm thinking immediately it's gonna be dust. It's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be agitating for my sinuses. And what I discovered was, when we got there, you're indoor a lot, and then over there you don't eat pork. So pork is banned, of course, in the country, and alcohol. And not only that, it's like they have even though they're a desert and they don't grow much, their neighbors are pretty developed, so they bring over a lot of the food from them. And a lot of the systems they have in place is organic. It's organic food. But it didn't dawn on me like where the food was coming from or how it was. I was just kind of forced to change my diet because, of course, when I was in Jamaica, in their supermarkets, it's displays of fresh seafood. The meats are halal. The vegetables are organically grown, probably in greenhouses. And and would you believe I was not troubled with sinus at all for the entire year. So when I got back to the Caribbean, I decided that I'm going to continue on that diet, whatever that diet was. And I started to eat less meat products. I still eat meat, but I just eat less of it. And I ate more vegetables, more fruits. I eat a lot of, I wouldn't say I eat a lot of starch, but I love pasta. And eat sweet potato. And shortly after, when I came back, I think it was in 2018, 2019, I started doing green juices. That's what led me to the farmers market, Ujima Farmers Market, because I started to say I'm going to source as much organic produce as I can to go into these green juices. And from that, started to get a lot more curious as to what really is organic food. Why do they call it organic food? What constitutes as organic food? Because as a chef, I used to believe that Jamaica is very special, but that it's majority of our food is organic. I would not, until Nicole pointed it out, and through the research of Dr. Robinson and others, that there's so much pesticide in our food. I just used to think, you go to Coronation Market and we have a plethora of fresh foods. They look beautiful, great produce, but didn't know that they were pretty dirty food. So it's a very interesting journey for me to learn and pay attention to, because as a chef, she's very right. We are the pharmacists. We put the ingredients together. And sometimes I get very annoyed because I would go out in the field, and when I'm shopping, I'm very cautious of the ingredients. Like, I taste a lot. Right? I'll go in the farmer's market and I'll taste the cherry tomatoes, I'll taste the little herbs, I'll taste a piece of the lettuce. Because even though it looks good, there's a particular flavor that I'm looking for. What I don't know yet is, how would we be able to tell is just pesticides change the flavor of the food compared to organic? Because I have a very sensitive palate. So I can taste cucumbers, for example, and there's a bitterish taste or a watered down taste that I don't want. There's a very subtle sweetness that I'm looking for, or a crunch, a light crunch when I have a cucumber, versus cherry tomatoes versus broccoli. I'll taste raw broccoli, raw cauliflower. I'll taste them all. But I just want to know, the nutrient dense and the flavor density of a particular vegetable and things that I'm putting together for, let's say, my brunch or my dinner menus, lunch menus, etc. So as a chef, those things are particularly important to me. And I'm just very happy to be a part of this community and this very important discussion, because I think the more we put it to light, these things, a lot of people keep asking, why is healthy things so expensive? And you realize that's a part of the system. It's demand and supply. And I think through these conversations, we will start to demand more of the healthier stuff. And then you can have that shift as you go along. Right. So I won't take up much of the time in the presentation. I'm just really excited to go into the discussion and the questioning. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. I'm gonna leave it right here for now until we continue in this conversation.
Chef Brian Lumley, thank you so very much. I tell you that the diversity in terms of the experiences of our guests today really is adding quite a bit to the conversation that we're now going to delve into, because I know this is why you came. Yes, you came for the presentations. That is the launching pad for the conversations we're going to have. But I know that you also have a myriad of questions to ask our guests. And so we're moving now into the panel discussion. So this is where now we're going to be engaging them in conversation, putting questions to them. And by the way, we're encouraging you to drop the questions in the chat. So place your questions in the chat so we can access them. Mike and the team, they will bring those questions up on screen so we can see what the questions are and, of course, get the answers. And, of course, I have a myriad of questions. I have a whole host of questions just having gone through the various presentations, and each of the presenters had brought something different to say. They brought something different to the table, but in so many ways they're on the same page, and I want us all to be on the same page as well. So we're bringing up the panel now so we can engage them in conversation. And I really want to start in very much the same way that we started the conversation this morning with Liz Soames. Liz, by the way, I love your backdrop. Those bananas look very inviting.
Sexy.
Yes.
They're not real.
One couldn't tell. All right. So, Liz, I wondered, I know that you've been doing a significant amount of work in Jamaica, but have you also been taking a look at what is happening in the broader Caribbean and Latin American, Central American region?
Well, what's going on in Jamaica is, in many ways, can be considered a microcosm for really the world. With the exclusion of the European Union and a few other regions, glyphosates in particular, and particularly in the US, are still used widely and lack a specific regulation. I would say that, as you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation, about the kind of global food security crisis that is really on our hands, that is by nature a global issue where you think maybe in the United States or really even in Jamaica that food insecurity is something that is really just not on the table, but it truly is when you think about, as Chris was saying, the degradation of soil, as Nicola was mentioning, really everybody, degradation of soil versus the amount of population that is really in need of food and healthy food. It's a big challenge. So I would say our issues in Jamaica are both related to our island and also are connected across the globe.
Dr. Robinson, the role and the work of the Pesticides Control Authority is significant, but I don't want to start there. I want to start with you, with the fact that you are an entomologist. And one of the things that I certainly have noticed in the work that I've been doing with the farmers and focusing on the farming community in the country, and this is not something that is happening just in Jamaica, there is a significant proliferation of insects and pests that is taking place. And I wondered if that also has a lot to do with an increase in pesticides use. So even though we're producing products that are supposed to be getting rid of the insects, are we causing an even greater problem?
All right, this is one of the cases where I wonder, is it the eggs or the chickens first? Because if there is a lot of pests, and that probably is causing the high use of pesticides. From the research I've done over the years, the high use of pesticides has resulted in even higher levels of pests, because they have put so much pesticides into the environment that it has destroyed the natural enemies. It has created an imbalance. And as a result of that, now they have to be going for more pesticides. But if the thing that caused the problem is what you're going to use to solve it, it's not going to be solved. And so the first thing to say to them is that you can't solve this problem by applying more and more toxic pesticides. We have to understand that what we have done is we have created an ecological imbalance. We must realize that a pest is nature's way of restoring a balance, right? Because if you get up and you have monocropping everything, nature is going to say, this is not balanced. The best way for me to create a balance is for a pest to eat it down. So it's how you design your farming ecosystems to make sure it's balanced, so nature doesn't think it needs to fix anything. And then you have to be going there with pesticides. So I think probably the overuse of pesticides is making the problem of pests worse.
There are so many lessons that I have been learning about the similarities among human beings and animals and our plants. We're not that different from each other. Physiologically, we're different, but we're talking about the same kind of issues and challenges. We're talking about the same kinds of things that we need in our bodies to grow and develop. And I wonder, Doc, if there is anything that you're learning from all of that study of the pests that you can transfer to us as human beings to help us to better understand how to deal with the pests.
Yeah. The thing is, you're so correct in that, we are not that much different. When you look at it down to a molecular level, it's just that we have more of the same molecules making up different things. And so it's really something you can learn. And that's why I usually point out to individuals that, so I sit in a lab and I use test insects to look at the impact pesticides have on them, right? And I keep saying to persons, it's no different from the impact it will actually have on us. It's just that we probably need more of that amount, because we have such a larger system for it to have an impact on us. But to get persons to understand that you're right, we're not that much different. We're just a little bit more of the same thing that makes us a little bit more complicated. And when we break it down and simplify it, you just realize that it's just a matter of time before what kills an insect is going to actually kill us. So an insect dies in 24 hours, we may die in 24 years. We just have to understand, that the high level of exposure we have is not something that is good for us as human beings at the moment.
Thank you so very much for the perspective. Let us bring Chris Binns in, because just listening to you, Christopher Binns, I get the feeling that what you really want to push for is a change in policy And I wondered what you would like to see in that policy.
Well, the policy is one thing, but first we have to do a change in the mindset. And I think when we talk just hearing what Dr. Robinson said a little while ago, and the question that you asked is also very important. You know, we've developed something that they call Terminator insects. You remember that movie Terminator that he just couldn't die? So what we've done by using all of these chemicals is that we've enabled these insects to kind of morph themselves by adapting all of these other capabilities that make them resistant to all of these chemicals. So you could be spraying your life away and they're just like, I'm a Terminator. I'm going to keep on killing what you're trying to grow. But if we think about exactly what you said, our connection with nature, that when you clear an area and you're going to produce a crop, you've destroyed the natural environment. So the bugs that were there were living off of the grass, they were living off of the wild plants, and you've now eradicated all of that. But they're still there to a point. So what are they going to eat? And exactly going back to monocropping, you're going to put in this crop of tomatoes, which is something I like to use all the time. You put in this beautiful crop of tomatoes, they're coming up great, they look wonderful, and the caterpillars are just one side going, yeah, this is for us. This must be for us because you've destroyed my food source, but hey, you've provided me something else that I can eat. So they're going to totally take over that crop. And if your first response is, I'm going to have to kill this insect, he's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to go through my life cycle. I'm going to maybe die, but I'm going to leave my eggs in the field. And then they're going to come up. They're going to be stronger. They're going to develop a resistance to this chemical. And so you're going to keep exactly what you're saying. You're repeating this cycle where you're actually building the insect's resistance to these chemicals, and you're enable them to be more dominant in the same environment that you're trying to get rid of. So the first thing we have to do is we have to have a mindset that says we're not working against nature. We and nature are one. Exactly what you said. If you look at your fingerprint and you go to a tree, all of those little marks that are in your fingerprint are the same marks when you take a cross section of a tree, right? We depend on nature for our survival, and nature depends on us for its survival. It's a symbiotic relationship that we've turned to an adversarial relationship. So the first thing is a change in the mindset. And I think if we change the mindset, then the policy would easily follow. And we would recognize that a lot of the policies that we have in place are actually contributing to the insecurity in our food system.
Okay, thanks,
What
Chris.
I would like to see first, we have to make farming sexy. You see how Chef
Definitely.
Brian makes chefing sexy? He's the hottest chef in the world right now. You check his page, it's just beautiful people. Check it out, his beautiful food. And because he himself is a good-looking guy, he's very attractive. So people are attracted to what he does. The average age of your farmer is like 55 or 60. It's not sexy. Nobody wants to get into something that they don't see as attractive. So if we don't have a youth that is taking over the farming sector after these 50, 60-year-olds and are integrating all of these technological practices. They're on their YouTube talking about farming. They're on their Instagram talking about farming. They're attracting other young people to say, you know what? This is something, I don't have to be a DJ. I don't have to be a football player. I don't have to be a track star. I can be a sexy farmer. So we have to make farming attractive to a wider cross-section of our population, especially young people. So that is the next thing we have to have. We have to make farming sexy again. I think Althea is having a little buffering issue. So I think
Well,
Nicola, you
I can
wanted to
jump
join
in.
in.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in with a couple of things. Absolutely, we've been doing that, and I think obviously, Chris, you've been doing it as well because people come to the projects that you've been doing, the Session Bush, and also the farm, and see you actually doing it and actually making a livelihood of it. And that's one of the things. Like, we don't want to go into farming because we're not going to make any money and that kind of stuff. And that's why people tend to never want to create that balance in terms of, there's always a thinking of this loss. But one of the things I wanted to jump in and say is that if we talk about a mindset change, we were able to go to the IFOAM conference in Taiwan the other day, meeting Indian farmers, where in one province they have 1,000 organic farmers, not just saying they're organic, but certified organic. And there's another 4,000 farmers that are doing medicinals, another part of India, and again, certification. Part of it for us, I think, in Jamaica is because we are very much see-me people. We want to see it, show it to me. We haven't seen that. We haven't gotten a chance to travel in the US and see larger organic farms or even a host of organic farms. We say, RADA will say it can't happen. No, man, it can't work here. And then you go across and you get a chance to go to these other spaces and see it actually happening and how they've organized themselves. There's a whole state in India that is 100% organic. They've done it. So until we get to see that, we're going to keep saying that stuff that it doesn't work. And the other thing is, everything that we need to do organic practices in the Caribbean is already been done and designed. The systems are there. Right now we have an outbreak of bee armyworm. There is a company, we actually brought in a product called Spendix. It's a biological out of Switzerland. The Boulders Research Station, people have tested it. It's something that works. All it needs is somebody to bring in that particular product. So all the things and the pests and the challenges that we have, it's already been worked out. But what you said about is a mindset shift that has to happen. And what I find is a lot of different schools, because some of the professors, we love them dearly, but they're not very exposed to some of the newer things that are out there in the organic world. They keep saying it can't work. And we have to shift that. And actually, what I'd love to do is to take a bunch of people to India to go see those 1,000 farms, so they can actually see it in operation and stop saying it can't work. So can you imagine Jamaica with 1,000 organic farms? What would that look like? It's totally doable and totally possible. But if you can't see it and you can't imagine it, you can't really, and you don't, you've never been exposed to it, we're not going to be able to move to that. And so it's very much about policy, but it's really about equipping the different stakeholders are in this thing together. It's not just the RADA officers or just ministry, it's the entire sector, for them to understand that this is totally possible and we should be doing this. And we have a reputation in the Caribbean anyway, because really, when you look at it, ITIL was the first thing before organic, right?
Yeah.
See how come we are not, now we're asking people, brand Jamaica people think to come to Jamaica and they want locally grown food and they want organic. The studies have already been done. But what we have to do now is put those practices in place and do the training and shift the lens.
Nicola, I think what you're saying is so important, and Chris as well. The idea of policy and mindset dovetailing, I feel like they are inextricable. Aha moments in my career in Jamaica was when slow food actually gave me and a couple rural farmers from St. Elizabeth a scholarship to attend the Terra Madre Slow Food Conference in 2005, so almost 20 years ago. And the wisdom that the farmers I brought achieved from being in community with small farmers from around the world, from Bhutan to India to West African countries, everywhere was represented there, was extraordinary. And I had this light bulb kind of go off in my head, similar to what you were saying about delegations going elsewhere and being able to see what's possible. And if we're speaking about a dovetail between mindset and policy, my biggest dream, and I'd love to just put it out here to all the people listening and the panelists, is to really get some government officials, whether those are folks from RADA or folks from the Ministry of Agriculture in general at all different levels, to participate in a delegation to places like India and Bhutan. Particularly Bhutan is a bit of a pipe dream for me because they're in 100% organic country. But maybe it could even be lower hanging fruit. So there's a lot of places in Central America that are even closer to us, Costa Rica, etc., where seeing it, like you said, Nicola, is believing it. And so I'd love to just put that out there, that is something I would really love to see happen. And I'm certainly willing to put the sweat equity behind that to get that going. And I appreciate the comments that both you and Chris said about policy met with mindset shift.
All right. I'm going to put a pause on you, the presenters, for just a moment, because we need to bring in the audience. They have a number of questions. In fact, I believe we have 13 questions. I'm going to take the first one from my colleague, Kalisha Williams, who says, how do we balance the need to reduce diseases affecting crops, especially due to climate change, with the need to protect our food environment from harmful pesticides? Dr. Robinson, I'm going to ask you to kick off first on that question, and then perhaps I'll go over to Liz Soames afterwards.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah. No, as I was mentioning before, we need to get away. We like to think that a farm, and as you heard Chris say, you have a farm and you have a natural ecosystem and you just flatten it and you decide that you're going to put a crop in. And that's what I was saying, that when you do that, because you have destroyed an ecosystem, nature is not going to take that lying down. It's going to fight back. And one of the ways it fights back is to give you a good pest problem, because that pest problem is to restore, is the first step in restoring the balance. And that's why we need to shift our farm for them to realize that what we're doing is that we're creating an agricultural ecosystem. It must be a diverse and balanced system, so nature does not think that it has a problem to solve. So it's the whole thing of retraining our farmers. And this agriculture that we inherited from our colonial masters, it cannot work in an island ecosystem. And I'm not one of the scientists that believes that this thing does not work. We have not gone out there and generated the data to show that it can. And so it's changing the whole mindset and developing island sensitive agricultural ecosystems, and then we won't have these problems to be fighting pests with pesticides, or so many pesticides.
Liz Soames, what is your research telling you?
Well, I couldn't really agree more. I don't want to reinvent the wheel and go on and on with emphatically agreeing with Dr. Robinson. So I would just like to say something maybe even a little simpler, which has been a tactic that has really worked for me in transitioning folks to organic. I think Nicola mentioned it as well. Reminding farmers about what their grandparents used to do has been key. And many of those tactics are employed the world over, and we need to relearn them.
Thank you so very much. Chef Brian Lumley, I'm going to bring you back in. I want you to piggyback on something that Christopher Bin said. And the reason I'm asking this question of you is that experience that you had in Qatar that has brought you to the place where you are now in terms of your own personal journey with food and how it impacts your system. You had to go through a change yourself. You had to be more accepting of some of these kinds of issues, and you're still on that journey of learning. How do we encourage others to get on that journey? How do we help them to understand that this relationship that you have with food is so important that you have to sit down and make wise decisions?
Well, I think nowadays it's a little bit more easier than 10 years ago. We live in a world of social media and there's a lot of data happening there. So you're starting to see a shift amongst young people. I certainly see it from where I sit and my day job, which is at the corporate chef for Nestle. And one part of the things that I do here is to follow the research and follow the data. So we are now, I wouldn't say forced, but in terms of business longevity, you realize that you have to change a lot of the items they use in a product to make it better and to make it safer. Now, it's hard to just do a cold switch like that because then you have competitors out there as well. So for example, I wouldn't expect us to just have the farmers stop using pesticides in one go, just like that. It's never going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Slow progression, right? But the data is certainly showing that people are paying attention to what they're putting in their bodies nowadays. And you see it obviously with the rise and interest in organic food or the farmers market. If you see the crowds at the farmers market compared to a few years ago, it's completely different now. Now there are communities building with people peaking interest. So what I would say is a lot of focus on health. listening to your body. I started to listen to my body. So, for example, when I eat foods, if I eat something and it gives me a stomach ache, as automatically my body telling me, no, we don't want that. Something is wrong. Get that out of my system. Do not put it back. Right. And just from that little warning, because sometimes if you probably it upset the system and you have gas and you're just thinking, oh, that's a Jamaican thing, just drink some tea. I start with that mentality. Like if I put something in my body and it gives me a headache, or it gives me a stomach ache, or it gives me any sort of discomfort, I'm not going to eat it again.
Yeah,
Right? I
straight.
just move on and I just replenish my system, refresh my system with coconut water. Even nowadays, when you get a stomach ache and it leads to, let's say, diarrhea, I don't take Pepto-Bismol or any chemical or pills or anything. I flush my system with natural juices. Like, coconut water is primary example, replaces the electrolytes, and then I go through a nourishing phase where I give my body something to put it back. And I do the same approach when I get colds or flus. Yes, I'll take traditional medicine if it gets really bad, but in accordance to traditional medicine, you will also have nutrients to give your body a fighting chance to build your immune system and that kind of thing. So I think more and more I've started to pay attention to what those nutrients are. Where do I get them? How do I know that they are clean or 100% clean? And I put a lot of trust in Nicole and the farmers and the integrity that they show week in, week out, the dedication that they show. So that develops a trust, and for me to encourage people to do that, the first advice I give them is to listen to their bodies, because everybody's different. Genetics is different, DNA is different, but your body will tell you, right? You ever see you working, and you start to get sick. It's your body, the first warning telling that your body telling you that you're overworked, right? You need a break, you need to step back. So your body will tell you everything it needs to know. You just need to listen to it.
Listen, yeah, man.
All right.
True, true.
I'm going to ask Mike to start bringing up those questions on screen. But while Mike is doing that, Nicola, I have a question for you, because the task of the JOAM-JENESYS project, outside of all the training that you are providing, you're having to convince farmers who have been traditionally using pesticides over the years that, listen, we don't want you to use them any at all. That is a hard sell to farmers, these conventional farmers who have been pushing for this. So even the way we have framed what we're saying here today, we have dubbed the conference Pretty Dutty Food. Can't go to a traditional farmer with that. What do we do? How do we couch it in such a way that you're helping them, but you're not insulting them? You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. So how the project is being developed and we're taking around, it really is for all farmers. So it is, no matter if you're farming, you should know how to make compost, because it's like, you go to a basic school or a high school, you say to a child, do you know your ABCs? Most children would know the ABCs. And this is the thing with farmers. Compost is one of the most important things, is a basic element of any farming system. And so what we're trying to do is to demonstrate and show how you can do these different strategies that their grandparents used to do. This is not something that is new, whatever. Maybe in the last 20, 30 years, people have gotten away from it because they can just buy that fertilizer. But it is something that they should do. So we're literally taking the various strategies, 11 strategies, going around and showing, oh, you need a companion plant. You remember you used to do this before? We never used to do a monocrop. So we're really taking our time and demonstrating both, not just to the organic farmers, because there are people, we're continually learning. So we're doing that with the organic people, the people are looking at organic, but also to all the I would say conventional, whatever you want to call them, the other farmers are there. Backyard gardeners, everything, everybody. Anybody's interested in where their food's coming from, we're willing to show you that. And so that's the approach, because it's just best practices. It's not something that we're trying to, shift anybody into any particular, it's just best practice across the board. And once you
like the idea, Nicola, of taking them back to their roots.
Right, so important. And the roots is really the connection. Yeah. One of the things that when we do the training is to really let people understand that you're divinely connected to the natural world outside from you were born. And so it should not be a war against, it's a war against yourself, right? and you're constantly so once we have those kind of conversations as we're doing the trainings, people really get it, and they start to open up their eyes and start to wake up. And it really is a process now. I think over the years we've gotten a lot of misinformation, but I feel like we're in an awakening. They're talking about a great reset. I would like to see the great reset happen in Jamaica, where we're actually now understanding we're in this beautiful paradise, this island that people travel from all over the world to come to, right? Every week we get flights in all over to come to Jamaica, that we are already living in this magical, amazing space that we just need to stir it and take care of it. And there's nowhere it says, in the Garden of Eden, that we should be dumping a bunch of things that we ourselves are going to have to ingest. So I think, as Chris says, a mind shift that has to change. But the thing is that we have to say something. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure we have this conversation, because there's a big elephant in the room, which is the practices that we're doing, and nobody wants to address it, right? And so this is the first step, is having this conversation and saying, listen, we shouldn't be poisoning ourselves, right? And there are other alternative ways that we could be getting the same, even a better result, and actually having a regenerative system.
All right. Let us take a couple of questions now from those who are online. This one is from Sean Mark Campbell. With the study done on pesticide residue on fresh produce, was maximum residue limit taken into consideration when measuring detection? And is there a link to both studies? Doc?
Yeah, absolutely. What happened is that because in doing the study, I report to a steering committee, which needs to release everything. What you notice I presented today was the qualitative component of the study. I didn't present the quantitative side, which for some of the residues, we do actually determine the concentration on the product. And when we determine that concentration, we also compare it with the MRL that's listed for that product. And just to give it, there are instances where the concentration we have found on a few crops have exceeded the MRL. In terms of access to the study, that I would have to leave. The team is led by the PCA, and that team has to determine how to make the results available.
All right. This one is from Ella. Ella, which group in Jamaica is active in forest, watershed, and species protection?
Well, I think NEPA has a lot of responsibility as far as watershed, mangroves. Definitely Jamaica Environmental Trust also is doing a lot of activities towards those
Environmental
things.
Foundation.
EFJ, right? Probably something that I shouldn't even touch on at this point, but we can't get around it, is that anything to do with agriculture is highly politicized. And we've seen recently what happened with the ruling with NEPA and the residue that was let go into the Rio Cobre. And there's a couple of things that we have to be aware that the National Environmental Protection Agency and the UDC are actually both under the auspices of the Office of the Prime Minister. So when you look at that, it seems like it'd be a good thing. If we're doing development, we're going to be considerate about the environment. But if you're in a situation where the two things conflict, which one of those things do you think is going to override the other? Is it going to be the environment, or is it going to be development? So I'll just leave that there.
All right. Here's a question from Charmaine Bailey Bloomfield, who says, Chef?
Oh, no, sorry, I'm just saying that's a big point. That's a huge food for thought.
Yes,
yeah.
it is. Charmaine Bailey Bloomfield says, how can we get rid of or minimize chemicals in the nuts and beans we eat? I soak them from overnight, discard the water, and then use. Is this one way, or are there other ways? Who wants to tackle that one? I don't know.
Which word that is?
Yeah, I'm gonna let me take a person, because as somebody who has studied the fate of pesticides in the environment, and so one of the things you have with a lot of these pesticides, they are not very water soluble. So you're not getting them coming out in water. A lot of them are what you call lipophilic. They love more organic solvents. The type of organic solvents you may need to pull them out, you then can't eat the food after that. So the main thing is to make sure it's not in the nut in the first place. rather than to try to get it out. Even when you have people like, for example, on the fresh fruit, and we did a study on that where we're looking at can you wash it off? There's a certain concentration that is bound. You wash it, you still have a certain percentage on it. So the main thing is to ensure that you really don't have it on it in the first place.
Doc, as a follow up to that, does heat destroy some of these pesticides?
Yes, he denatures some of them, but the bad thing is that sometimes the heat converts it to a byproduct that's sometimes just as or more toxic than the
More
parent
toxic.
compound.
Yes, yes.
So you have to be very careful.
Right, boy, I telling you, everywhere you go, make a joke here.
Mm.
All right, here's one from Carrot Juice. Dr. Robinson, does detoxing help to flush these pesticides from our bodies? If yes, how often? And what products can we use for that detox?
All right, so I'm not an expert on that, but the concern I would have is that, remember that I mentioned that a lot of them are lipophilic. So some of them, and that's why we worried about the HHPs, because they are very lipophilic in that they are fat loving. So when they go into the system, they get absorbed and they get stored in fats. That's why you hear people say they're more concerned about women being exposed to pesticides, because they have more fat deposits that the pesticides go into, and a lot. So because of that, when it gets absorbed into the fat and is being stored, detox really will not help at that stage. So I really don't know, but I'm worried about lipophilic ones that are stored in your fat, which when it's stored there, it's locked away, and it's until you start losing weight, then it gets released back into the system. And that's why I see some people, when they start to lose the fat, it has to go somewhere. It goes back in the system, and you start having the toxic effects again.
All right, so here's another one. This is from Dr. Patricia Northover. To solve the pesticide dependency, need to solve the seed import dependence. If we use seeds that require chemicals for productivity, the question then is, how do you wean yourself off this input dependency business model? Nicola?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've been advocating is that we should be doing our own seeds here. To be honest, there's a global seed shortage. And I know that during COVID, we had a problem because Bodos actually produced some things, but they were totally out. They only produced about 5 things: some peppers, some corn, some sorrel seeds, that kind of stuff. So for an island, and we're depending on food security, it's kind of crazy that we're not actually doing more work on our own seed for our own microclimate. So you can't really depend on other people for your food. I mean, it's really crazy that we don't have a system for that. So I think it's very important. We talk about a policy change. This is definitely something we should do. And also to remember that I found out that in the 70s, we actually had a 100-acre seed farm, right? That this was something that we had started doing, that MD2 corn that is sometimes around, that is something that came out of that seed project. And I think that is something that if you're talking about investment in something, we should be having our own seeds that meets our microclimate, and it's done here. So we don't have to worry about importing other people's things, especially with the fact that there's a diminishing supply and it's only going to get more expensive. Whoever controls the seed, control the food and control the people.
All right. So before I take this next question that has popped up, I must tell you, Nicola and the team, that you have amassed a fantastic team of presenters, one, but you have also attracted a number of top academics and other people in industry here. This next question is from Olive Downer Walsh, who says the ongoing assessment of pesticide residues in locally produced crops is of importance. Does the study include imported produce inclusive of post-harvest treatments? And if no, can this be included? Dr. Robinson, this one is yours too.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, no, this study does not include imported produce. And the simple reason why that is not included is just a matter of funds. The persons who are funding the study wanted us to focus on what is available locally.
Okay.
Also,
Thank you so
Althea,
much.
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to add in there and jump back to what Chef Lumley was talking about with his personal health experience, is that we look at our health in a very interesting way. And I just want you to look at the word pharmacy, right? If you spell it Farmacy, it now makes the farm the source of your medicine. So if your food is directly connected to your medicine, then we should be healing ourselves with our food. Exactly what Chef says. If you eat something and it gives you a headache, it gives you a stomach ache, something is wrong. Something is wrong with what you just ate. And what I noticed with a lot of people that are experiencing health issues, Chef also had a question about fibroids and all of these other issues that are now prevalent in our health system, cancer, diabetes, all these things directly link back to our food and the way our food lifestyle. And when you get to the other point where you're talking about things like celiac disease, right? Which is this, a lot of people talking about they want to be gluten-free, they don't eat flour. Sometimes it's not necessarily the gluten, and the presentation that we had on earlier is telling you that a large part of the food that we're getting is grains, it's wheat. And wheat is one of the most pesticide heavy farming products that we have in our food system. And we consume so much of it, going back to the rice in so many different ways. So sometimes you're not maybe allergic to the gluten, but you're allergic to the composite of chemicals that are being sprayed on that wheat. So we need to really kind of rethink again our food system. And we had Taurus Riley up one time and we're talking about the pharmacy, and he says the pharmacy is what the farmer sees. So we need to kind of rethink all of that. The food should be your medicine. Let your medicine be your food and your food be your medicine.
That sounds like the next project for JOAM, pharmacy,
Yes.
pharmacology.
Yes.
Sounds like a good project that
Spell with a F.
Yes. Olive Downer Walsh is asking, does the conclusion of cancer-contributing substances include non-pesticide products or items to which consumers have intense exposure and access? Dr. Robinson, I know that you must be having cross conversation with people who are in the medical profession as well. So sorry, sir, they're putting you under pressure. It's not me.
Yeah, I looked at that one and I for that one I was just gonna plead the fifth. Right? That one I really would rather not comment on that, because we have not been screening it along the lines of it being carcinogenic. So yeah, when we do all the pesticides, we look at them and see which ones are listed as carcinogenic, and because if we think it is, we will raise a red flag. But I really don't want to say much more on that one, because it's outside of my scope.
All right. Claudel Maitland Wilson says, I have imported small quantities of heirloom seeds from an international website, but those seeds never perform as well as the ones I buy locally. What can I do to make the heirloom seeds produce or even germinate? Chris, you want to take that one?
Sure. For us at Stush, we typically only use heirloom seeds. And when we talk about heirloom seeds, you're talking about seeds that have been passed down from generation to generation. And one of the main advantages of heirloom seeds is that they are true to seed. So if I plant a Cherokee purple tomato, which is one of those heirloom varieties, I can extract those seeds, plant it back, and I'm going to get exactly that same seed. However, those seeds might require a little additional soil fertility. They might require a little additional protection from the environment. So one of the things that we do with our heirloom seeds is to provide very good plant medium, soil medium to germinate those seeds. And typically germinating seeds don't really require a lot anyways, but even after you've germinated them, to grow them out, that plant is going to require an exceptional amount of nutrients to maintain it, because one, it's not sprayed with a chemical that's going to prevent the ants from eating it. Two, it's not sprayed with a chemical that's going to prevent a fungus or a virus from attacking it at the germination stage. So you really have to have a very clean environment, and you cannot bring heirloom seeds into a conventional environment and expect them to perform at the same level, because chances are those heirloom seeds were grown in an organic or a regenerative environment. So you have to keep the environment similar to the environment that the plant was originally grown in.
All right. May I ask you, Liz, to comment on that question as well?
Yes, so I tend to use only organic or heirloom seeds on my property as well, farming on my own, but also what I recommend to clients and around the place. I think one of the reasons why this person who asked the question had a lot of success with conventional seeds is because they've been genetically modified. So maybe it's a quick fix in the beginning. But with organic farming, regenerative farming, farming with heirloom seeds, like Chris was saying, you have to really have a little bit more patience, a little bit more time. You're going to have potentially a less high germination rate in the beginning, but it will prove to be effective over time.
And over time, they'll learn how best to do it. Ella asks, is there an initiative of farmers island-wide getting paid to be a part of soil health testing to have solid evidence of pesticide impact? Dr. Robinson, well, it doesn't matter. Anyone who is comfortable taking it.
I was going to say it's a bit of a conflict of interest if you're paying somebody to test their own soil. The pesticide study project, which has been funded by both private and public partners, pays the scientists and the other folks who are in the program to carry out the soil testing itself and the studies themselves. That's part of our funding. So that is the initiative that I think that Ella is inquiring about.
All right. Charmaine Bailey, and by the way, I should point out that we're past the cutoff time, but I'm pushing ahead because I want to at least get through all of those 13 questions that were asked by the participants online. I'm hoping that we will take it to about 12:15. Charmaine is asking how can I get my soil tested? Does RADA or any other organization offer that service to small farmers like me free of cost? The short answer is yes. But I suggest you reach out, Charmaine. I can answer this question. Reach out to the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA, the office in your region, and have conversation with them about it. But Nicole, I want to know, though, is there a test that can, we know that there is virgin soil, and we know that there is soil now that people have used and there are chemicals there. Does JOAM have any kind of test, or any other organization in the country have any kind of test?
Well, I actually want to kind of clarify that, because ALMD, which is part of the ministry, the soil, they have a soil lab. And because of the project, they've actually been able to get some more equipment, because normally when you go, I'd always recommend anybody who's thinking about farming, you have to get your soil tested, right? Just go there, because you know what you're working with.
That's
because
right.
you maybe wanting to plant tomatoes and it needs to be high in this or low in this or whatever. It's best to really go first and do that so you don't waste your money. And then, I mean, I have tons of stories of people not testing their soil and putting a lot of fertilizer on there, and then they don't get a crop because they put the wrong, they don't even know what their soil is needing, right? So that's one. But LMD, there's a cost. I think if you're part of the Genesis, I think it's something about $3,000. And there's also Bodos that does the NEMA, their lab also participates with this. So the first thing to do is really call the ministry and ask for the ALMD department. They have a wonderful set of wonderful people. Dr. Marson is there and her staff, and over Bodos as well. They really have been doing a great job with us. They come out really quickly. They do the work. You can speak to RADA as well. They will also come out and help you get your soil samples and get that going. I can't, sometimes some of the other companies will take the soil and send it overseas, but now we actually have on island, and it's a really quick turnaround. You don't want to wait anymore like 6 months and a year like we used to, because now all the equipment is there and they can do the proper testing for you.
All right. Chef Brian Lumley, before I take Adrian C's question, how do we develop a better relationship with food from where you sit, and from the questions that you get asked as a chef, and the meals that you're being asked to prepare or being encouraged to prepare? And then I'm thinking back to what it is that Chris would have mentioned about this whole issue of the pharmacy. How do we take people on that journey, you think?
Well, I mean, for me, I think majority of it is my integrity and why I got into food and the love that I have and passion that I have for food. Coming up, I may not know everything, so I wouldn't say I use everything that I use is 100% clean or is best for you. You know, a lot of it is. It's almost like when you hear dancehall artists argue about what songs to sing, like the song they really want to sing doesn't get the airplay, but some of the garbage and so on that they sing about in the environment is what gets the most boost. So it's almost a similar thing. Like I want to cook healthy dishes, but everybody buy fried chicken. You know what I mean? And to survive, you probably not me, but most chefs that would it would happen to. So there is a correlation in that space where you would have to do things to survive, but at the same time you come up with alternative project and build that community. And when I started 689, that was a challenge for me because I I was determined not to serve rice at the restaurant. I had this thing called croquettes. And I remember I went through such a headache in the first couple of months because the croquettes were made of grown provisions. So it didn't have any imported anything. We used local Irish potato, dashi, cocoa, and sweet potato. We make a brown mash, bread it, and fried it. And it was fried crispy, so it didn't soak up a lot of oil or anything. But I deserved not to serve rice. And I did an ice cream scoop with it, so it's shaped like an egg. And Jamaicans come in the restaurant and be like, "What kind of dinosaur egg this? I don't want this." And it's just like a bunch of complaints you get over a couple of months. But what tend to happen slowly is that there's a lot of ladies who frequent the restaurant, and the restaurant was at late night. It was like 5:30 to midnight. So what you find is that they didn't even want the rice, and they got acclimatized to it eventually, to the point where I had to bring rice on the menu because I did like curry conch and certain curry dishes. And Jamaicans, if you're having curry, you have to have rice. But what I found was interesting is that when I started to serve rice with those dishes, they got upset, asking back for the croquettes. So it was because the restaurant was getting so popular, it was hard to make so many croquettes. And they find that there's a slow shift. So I realized that Jamaicans just they're not very open to change immediately. But if you stick to it and they get kind of used to it and they start to trust it, then the comfort level comes in and they realize when it feels good and it starts to affect their bodies in a positive way, and then they will continue with it. And so that's what I would say. We have to have a stick to itiveness to our mission. And the more we educate people, I think it's the better they'll be accepting of it.
Right. So we're going to grow some dinosaur eggs on the farms.
It also goes back to policy as well. Again, right? It's like, when was the last time you saw a scandal bag? Right? We decided that we were gonna ban scandal bag, and as much as we were dependent upon it, you had to find something else to put your grocery in. Some people went to the basket. We went to these recycling bags. They banned styrofoam. Right now, they're working on banning these sweetie drinks that we're getting. So we can have the idea as a community, but if you get that idea backed by policy, then it now becomes very much. And I have to big up Chef Stush, because when we started to produce what we were producing, people were like, you only serve vegetable? Not even little chicken? Can we get little piece of fish? And initially we were like, boy, this is gonna be hard to get people to wrap their brains around. So, let's serve a little fish, but we'll make the price really high. And people were like, we still gonna pay the price for a little fish. And then we came around and we said, no, if we don't grow it on the farm, we're not serving it. So we phased out the fish. We phased out anything that had egg, butter. We started to make our own butter. Big up the chef again. We started to make our own cheeses. So you can replace, like the croquette, you can replace this appetite for what we were eating that's basically killing us with something. And we don't like to even talk about the food being healthy, because sometimes when you mention healthy food or vegan food, people automatically, they have a knee-jerk reaction. This is going to be some plastic cardboard that's seasoned to taste like chicken. And I don't want that to eat. I want something that tastes good, that makes me feel good. So our emphasis, we don't use the word vegan in our food preparation or any of our advertising, anything. We talk about ITA, plant-based, plant-forward, and at the core of it, we're the original sexy vegetarians.
All right.
And
Love it.
sorry, let me just add 30
Sure.
seconds to what Chris said, and I have a big up Chef Stoosh as well. One of the things, it's a peeve of mine, and one of the things I love about them is that they're not pretending to be meat. They're not selling you a meat replacement. They're not selling you, you know, cauliflower, chicken wings type of thing. Like they're creating a new avenue of food, a different experience. Like you're falling in love with vegetables, they're creating their own dishes out of plant based. And I love the terms that he used because that's what they're
Plant
having. So
forward.
it's its own identity. It's not a substitute for anything else, you know. So I love that kind of stuff to big on all the time. And it's great.
That's up, Chef.
Now to Adrian C's question that has been there for a while. How can one get involved with JOAM-JENESYS, and what roles are there to participate in or partake of? And this is coming out of Montego Bay. Nicola, you have a convert.
All right. So we just happen to be working at the Rasta Village in St. James. That's where we're going to be doing all our training in St. James, Parish of St. James. So you just need to connect us on the website. You go to JOAM website. Our contact is there. The schedule for next month, we're going to be doing, I think we're doing biochar is going to be one of the things they're going to be doing next month. We did composting, vermicomposting, statics, Johnson Sioux. The first month, the second month we just finished land management, all the different land management practices, and we're moving on to doing some biochar, then EM, cover crop rotation, all of those things. So just connect with us. We'll get you on the mailing list for Genesis in St. James, and you'll get the flyer. We'll tell you how to get there, and we're happy to share all the information and those demonstration sites. If you miss a subject matter, those demonstration sites will be actually offering again, because they're going to be practicing and showing you how it's done. So we're making sure that we don't just come and the information is only that one time. We're going to be showing you over and over and demonstrating those practices. Yes.
And Adrian, become a JOAM member. Check us on our Instagram, which is JOAM. We have JOAM Limited, which is the website. And from there, you get actively involved in this community that is Genesis and so much more as well. So hit us up anywhere you see JOAM, and we'd be happy to have you on board.
Excellent. Wade Barrett says, what's your take on using neem for commercial pest management? Also, is that approach managing the symptoms and not managing the problem? I'm having a challenge with whiteflies. Dr. Robinson?
All right.
So rosemary.
Yeah, they if you to pick out just neem, I would say I don't have a problem with neem being used part of an overall management system as a replacement for the chemical in the chemical component. However, it's just for people to be clear. I mean, make sure it's a pest management system and not a pest control system where you're just trying to get rid of the pest. Because even though neem may be something approved for organic, a proper organic system does not go to the chemical control first. So even though it's neem, so it's not right for you to just have a pest problem and go with neem. So how do we ensure that we have a full management plan that protects the natural enemies, that designs the system to create the ecological balance we need? And then if we have that well-designed organic system, and by some change that we didn't have control over, the pest population goes up, then you can go in with some neem or some other natural product to get the population down. But I just want people to know that you should not be trying to use organic inputs in a conventional system. You need to change your production system to an organic system, which does not have the numerous pest outbreaks that a conventional or neo-conventional system has.
So the answer to his question is in his question. It's a systematic approach rather than a piecemeal approach. You have to really change the whole system, change the mindset, and then you can be on your way to using neem, moringa, all of these other natural plant-based inputs that can improve your productivity.
I am of the opinion, Nicola Shirley Phillips and Christopher Binns, who both sit on the JOAM board, the members of the JOAM team. You're going to need a part two of this pretty dirty food.
Absolutely.
Yes, the part
To
two
the
has to be
quarterly.
planned. Because
Definitely.
Well, we are. Don't forget that we do have Farming as a Business, a conference coming up
in
this
July.
year at University of West Indies this year, and we have. There's so many different topics. You're going to be confused about which class you want to go to. So now that we have people's emails and stuff, we're going to be sending it out. We'll probably be showing the flyer. We have a lot of really good speakers and just really practical information of how you can do farming as a business, but doing it in the organic way. So lots to share, and that's coming up in July.
All right, so 30 seconds to each presenter as we're closing out the session. Dr. Robinson, let us start with you.
I'm just happy that we started this discussion. I would not want it to stop here. And just remember, the public, you are more powerful than you think. So where we're talking about legislative changes, etc., and just lend your voice, give support to the what we are trying to do to ensure that we can clean up Jamaica's food chain.
Yeah.
Christopher?
Again, the opportunity to be here to have the discussion is great. I want to big up Chef Lumley for tuning in because, the transition from here is to the food. And if we can get people acclimated to the idea that our food has to be clean and it can be clean and sexy at the same time, then I think our victory is won.
Right. Liz Soames. Liz?
Oh,
Your 30 seconds.
sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers and also for all of the other panelists for including me. And I do hope that, and I know that my journey in organic agriculture in Jamaica will continue, particularly with everybody else's support. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me.
Chef Brian Lumley.
No, it's been an amazing 2 hours sitting here listening to the panelists, the questions from the public. I'm just very happy to be here, happy to be a part of the conversation. This needs to happen like quarterly so we can check in on the progress and the study that's going on. They've opened up a rabbit hole for me now, so I'm going to run straight through it. And yeah, I'd love to be the bridge between the farmers and the consumers. I'm happy to be that bridge to take questions from both sides. And it also will keep me accountable in the produce that I use and what I'm promoting. So the more you know, the more you grow. So yeah.
Thank you so very much. The conversation has to continue, and it has to continue at the level of our communities, starting with your home, because listen, you can't go out into the community and you're telling them to do something unless you're also practicing it at home. I see Nicola Shirley Phillips talking something about a movie giveaway. Nicola, you want to come back on screen and tell us exactly what you're talking about? She did mention the Farming as a Business conference that comes up in July 10th to be exact. Farming as a Business 2025. The theme is making connections from farm to plate. Yes, Nicola, what is this movie giveaway you're talking about now?
So if you tuned in exactly on time, you'd have seen a movie or coming up was called Organic Rising. So I think it's the first 90 people that after we finish, you're going to get an email sent out to you, and it's going to be a free coupon giveaway. If you wanted to see the rest of that movie, you just are going to follow the instructions that are given, click on it, and you have 2 months in which to be able to watch Organic Rising. It takes you through a number of different elements of the food system that they've been documenting in the US. So you have more information. And so we really want you to get this movie, watch it, share it with your friends, your family. If you have a church group you want to encourage, because it's important for us to have information and education around this issue and not just, not having the full information. So we wanted to share this movie with you. And so at the end, we're going to send it out to you. And the first 90 people, if we find that you have not been able to access it, because we had over 300 people that registered, right? So if you're not, then send us a email and we'll try and see if we can add you additionally on, so you'll be able to screen the movie. So I really am grateful for the producer of the movie. I think he may have even been online because they're having similar issues in the US, and he was able to make that movie, and it's a similar thing that we're having here. So if you're interested, do use that coupon code to be able to access the movie, and let us know what you think.
Thank you so very much, Nicole. I want to say a very big thank you as well to Janice Dehaney, Board Chair of the Jamaica Organic Agricultural Movement, Nicola Shirley Phillips, who is team lead on the Genesis project, the JOAM-JENESYS project, Liz Soames, Dr. Dwight Robinson, Christopher Binns, and Brian Lumley, who are all panelists. Albert Howard says the first duty of the agriculturalist must always be to understand that he is a part of nature and cannot escape from his environment. He must therefore obey nature's rules. From Goodreads, the appeal of organic farming is boundless. This mountain has no top. This river has no end. I want to encourage you to embrace it. Again, a big thank you to all of our panelists, Liz Soames, Dr. Dwight Robinson, Christopher Binns, Brian Lovely, and the entire team from JOAM. I have to say a big thank you to Mike and Daniel and the team from Cariflow. And until we meet in this way again, or perhaps in another forum, I encourage you, take care of yourself, be kind to others, and of course, do the best that you can for yourself, your system. Make sure you're feeding good, wholesome food to yourself. And of course, that you're preparing and serving good, wholesome food to others. Enjoy the rest of your day.